I'm going to get you your 30 grand. I said, we're not going to change the amount of money that you're getting. We're just going to change how it looks on paper. We're going to change the interest rate here from 2% to 8 1/8. And this was a 48-month term, by the way. And by doing that, it increased the amount of interest over those 48 months by $30,000. And they said, as long as we get paid, have at it.
So, hello, all my Why Not Real Estate peeps. This is Brian Lucier here on the Why Not Real Estate podcast. I want to welcome you to the show, our premiere episode of the Why Not Real Estate podcast. And it is my honor and privilege to have with me on the podcast today my longtime friend, fellow real estate investor in multifamily apartment buildings, successful property manager, retired board member of masslandlords.net, and overall a very clever guy when it comes to investing in real estate, master of Google spreadsheets, Mr. Rich Merlino. Welcome to Why Not Real Estate.
All right. I can't, I guess no intro would be complete without a mention of my spreadsheets.
So, Rich, welcome to the show today. I'm going to start off. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and what you used to do before getting into real estate?
Should I start with the pimping, or should I skip over that for the purposes of this show? What's the rating?
I would start with probably something having to do with a financial background.
Oh, that's really hard because I don't have a financial background. Well, you know what? I kind of do. So I bought my first triple decker working at McDonald's. So which isn't all that financial, but so I worked for McDonald's and I delivered pizzas for a number of years. While the rest of my high school mates were graduating from college when they were 22 with $100 or $200,000 in student loans, I had good credit and I had a work history and I had a rental property. So yeah, I didn't study this stuff in college. It kind of worked out that way that I ended up working in helping people with their personal finances after I had already owned the 3-family in Worcester. So it kind of went a little bit backwards.
So was that through a company? Were you doing it spin-off on yourself? What did that look like?
No, I was recruited into a company called Primerica, which at the time was part of Citigroup. Are you familiar with it? Have you ever heard of it?
Heard of Citigroup, yes.
You've heard of Citigroup, sure. So Primerica was, I met a nice guy. He was a customer at McDonald's, and he said I seemed like I was helpful, which was like the highest compliment I ever got at McDonald's. Because at the time, like my people skills were non-existent would be a compliment. They were like whatever's negative below 0. That's about where I was at the time. So yeah, I worked for the company for 6 months before I figured out it was sales. I wasn't that bright, but I learned a lot, and I was able to. I learned how to help people with their personal finances, and that's what I did. I went to people's houses and did that.
So you ended up with a rental property. You were working another job. Someone recognized your talent. They hired you. 6 months later, you figured it all out, and here you were helping other people with their finances.
Sure. I wouldn't say I figured it all out, but that's close enough.
So before you bought the real estate, the rental property, what type of influences did you have in your life that either people you grew up with, if it was family members, who put you on the track to say, why not real estate?
I can't think of a single influence that led me in that direction. It happened pretty organically. In that I moved up to Massachusetts when I was 19, and I noticed that they have in Worcester they have all these things called triple deckers, which, as far as I know, is kind of unique to this part of the country. That the rest of the country doesn't necessarily have these things in such abundance as this part of New England does, and I just I said, you know what? I'm a genius. I figured this out all by myself, Brian. That if I could get myself one of those, and like I could live in one of the apartments and rent out the other two, that it would pay my mortgage. And I was like, I better not tell anybody else about this brilliant scheme that I just cooked up all by myself, because then everybody's going to do it. And I found out there's 4,000 of them in Worcester, and 3,999 people had already figured out how to do that, and that's what they were doing. And but that's what I did. Really wasn't that original of an idea after all, but that was it. That's how I started.
So why real estate? What was it as an asset class that drew you to it?
Um, it just seemed to, like I said, the triple decker idea just made sense. And then once I had, you know, I'm cheap. I wanted a free place to live. So if I could get a free house, that seemed like a good start. And then, the next thought in my mind was, well, what if I had 10 more of these? Then I have a free place to live and like a whole bunch of other income too. And more income sounded good. Um, I'm not oversimplifying this on purpose. That was really kind of it.
So pretty interesting that it just kind of occurred to you that in your environment, you saw these properties, you figured it out, you could buy it, live in one, have the other tenants pay the rent, pay your mortgage, and you could live for free rent.
Yeah, that was kind of the long and short of it.
So I'm going to jump ahead to a big money question, right? You had mentioned what would it look like if I had more of these, okay, more passive income. So for someone who would just be starting out right now, probably realizing what you had realized in real estate, what piece of advice would you give someone, or if you had stepped on any landmines, what should they avoid? If you were talking to yourself 20 years ago, what would you be telling yourself to look out for today?
Oh, that's quite different. What I would tell somebody else and what I would tell myself. That
Yeah,
is
let's do both.
that is two distinctly different answers. What would I tell myself 20 years ago? Um, that's a tough one, because I feel like I definitely made a lot of mistakes, and uh, some pretty awful ones, along the some very expensive ones along the way. But I don't think that's avoidable. Uh, I joined the Worcester Property Owners Association about 6 months before I bought my first property, because I wanted to kind of do what you're talking about. Like, what kind of advice would these other people have been doing this for 30 years? What would they tell somebody who's just starting out? And I wanted to get in that environment, find out what to do, and probably more importantly, what not to do. I had gotten the idea of looking for the trade organization from the book called Landlording. I don't remember the author, but it was a big yellow book with this shyster looking guy with the top hat, the curly mustache.
Yeah, the cartoon. It's probably back there somewhere. Uh, yeah, I know it's back there. If I could find it real quick, I would. Oh, yeah, this one.
Oh, that's the one. Yep,
There's the book.
there's the
Landlord.
book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this had a lot of funny stories in it too.
Yeah, so that was so I read that, and it said you should go find an organization like that, and I said, well, that makes sense, and that's what I did. So I tried to get around people who who could kind of put me in the right direction, and I tried to sort out who knew what they were talking about. And if there was somebody who was in housing court every week and they didn't have 1,000 units, I knew every single piece of advice that person gave was terrible, and to not listen to them.
Wow, that's an
uh
interesting insight.
Yeah, so I kind of figured out who in the room was because I was brand new. I was like I said, I was 20, 22. I think by the time I closed on the property, I turned 23. But I didn't know anything, so I was trying to figure it out. So what would I tell myself? I think I'm kind of stumped on that because I wouldn't give up the mistakes that I made because they just led to growth opportunities that I needed as a person and as a professional. Ah, can
No,
I?
that has value. That has value. So
Um,
I'm trying to
and
wrap that.
I'm trying to think of something big. Like there are definitely like specific, minute things that I might tell my past self, but they wouldn't necessarily apply to everybody. Like I might give my past self some really specific housing court advice or advice about rental forms or something like that. But I don't think that's necessarily going to be really helpful to your audience at large. So I think I'm going to have to come back to that one.
Okay, okay. Um, let's talk about. I know that you had done some other properties as well. So tell us a little about what your holdings look like now, if you're comfortable doing that. We started with a three-decker. Do you still own that property?
I do not.
So what happened there? How did you dispose of that, and what happened after?
That is a really long story.
We got plenty of tape.
Okay. Um, there's a valuable life lesson in this one too. And there's not a short version of the story, so I'm happy to tell you.
Go for it.
Um, do you mind if I answer? I feel like I did a poor job answering the last question. Can I give you the answer that I can give you for the last one, which is what I would tell somebody else who wanted to get started?
It's your spotlight,
I would tell them to just start. And
right?
if somebody hears that and they throw their hands up and they're pissed off hearing that, they need to hear it the most. That's the thing that I had. That's the one ingredient that I had was that I was just willing to start and figure it out as I went because that's really just how most things are. And I read a lot of books, and that helps, but you can't you don't learn to swim by reading a book, right? At some point, if you don't get in the water, you're just not a swimmer. And that's really it. So the number one thing, as people in my life have seen me develop, the success that I've had, they're like, "Oh, I want to grab a coffee with you. I want to pick your brain." Like, yeah, I'm sure you get these time wasting emails and stuff all the time from people who, if somebody wants to pick your brain, they're not really going to. They're just avoiding doing something. Is really what it comes down to. So if somebody's ever sent that email or said that to somebody, and they haven't already like taken massive action on their own, stop it. Just start. Start doing what? Just start. And you have to. I can elaborate on that later, and that might make that answer a little bit more helpful. I can tell you what I did, and that might give you an idea of what I mean. But that is the number one thing that I see people who want to get started is they try to collect information and they try to meet the right people, and that stuff is great. Until you start, none of it matters. So
The triple
the
decker.
the triple decker that got foreclosed on.
I'm ready. Go for it.
We'll start with the ending. Uh, let's see. Um, this was in 2005, and this was when is that right? Yeah, this was in 2005. This was in August of 2005. Put the house on the market for sale, and at the time, real estate was very, very, very hot. And something would go on the market and it would sell in 2 hours. There's 30 people outside fighting over it and bidding for it. We've all seen markets like that. This was one of those markets. Um, that wasn't happening. So I told the realtor after 2 weeks, drop the price. And he said, no, 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 no. We're not gonna drop the price. And I said, no, something's not right. What
Hmm.
was happening last month is not happening this week. There's nothing wrong with this house. Drop the price. Reluctantly dropped the price, whatever it was, $10,000. 2 weeks later, still not getting offers. What ended up happening was that I had inadvertently observed that this bubble was about to burst, um, because it had started to slow down in our market. Obviously, it took a while before it slowed down enough nationwide for the bubble to start to burst. But like that was like it was that moment in Worcester, Massachusetts that had started to slow down. So this guy comes along, says he wants to buy the house. He gives he wants to give me wants to write me a check for $10,000 as a deposit. I said I don't take personal checks, and he makes faces and grimaces, and I said go get me a bank check. So he goes and gets a bank check, and because I'm a kid, at this point, as far as this guy's concerned, he's 30 years older than I am. In 2005, I was 26, and so he comes along, he brings me the check, and this guy is probably the most unsavory human being I've ever interacted with from the first moment. Just didn't like the guy.
Hmm.
Seemed scummy. Um, he was really, really rude to his. He had a woman who came with him every time, who was his associate, and he was rude to her. He said like terrible things about women, which is not something I'm into, but especially in front of her, it was the guy just sucked. But I needed to sell this house in a hurry because I had actually fallen behind on the payments because I was doing a very bad job managing the property. And there were a number of missteps that led up to that. I'll skip over that for now.
Okay.
But the business, so to speak, was on its last legs at that moment, which is why I was selling. And anyway, I don't. Should I say the guy's name? Sure.
No, no,
No.
no. Probably not.
Okay.
Right? John
Um.
Smith. John Smith. Poor John Smith.
All right. Um. The I'll tell you. I mean, I feel like people should just watch out for him. He's probably out of prison now. Because this was a long time ago. So I don't know exactly how he was doing it, but here's what happened with me. I ended up getting the $10,000 bank check, sold him the house, and I had an attorney on this. And he was all another huge red flag. Aside from the fact that the guy was just a scumbag, he's like, "You don't need an attorney." He's like, "Well, just they always slow things down." He says, "You're in a hurry." I was like, "Nah, I'm gonna have an attorney." And my attorney somehow missed this.
Wow.
This being something I'll tell you in a second, but sold the house, and part of the agreement was that I was going to be a tenant. I didn't want to move, so I went sold him the house, and I just continued to live in my apartment. And I was going to pay like $800 a month. And one day, this was in like September, so like December 23rd. There's a there's a notice on the door that the house is going to be auctioned in a couple of days.
Connect the dots.
I'll do my best. Like I said, I don't know exactly how he did what he did, but I'll tell you what he did. And I think mine was one of the last deals he did, if not the last deal. And I'm probably the only one that got the $10,000 because I insisted on the bank check.
Wow.
Um, but he did this. He did this 100 times. He would buy a house. The woman he was working with and somebody else. They were. It was this big fraudulent operation. He would buy the house and somehow get the deed transferred into the name of his company, and they wouldn't pay off the first lien holder, the mortgage company. And he was reselling the properties like fast enough that by the time the first lien holder figured out that the property was sold and they went to go do something about it, the property had changed hands twice. So he would,
Wow.
let's use mine as an example. So he's buying the house for, I don't even remember how much it was, $260,000. Um, he gives me $10,000. He gets the deed. He doesn't actually pay any other money at closing. And then he resells the house to somebody else for $250,000 or whatever it is. And he puts 250 grand in his pocket because he never had to pay anything other than his basic closing costs. It's nuts. So I don't know how he was pulling this off, but he did it 100 times, according to the attorney general. He went to a federal penitentiary a couple of months after my debacle, in New Jersey. And then when he was finished there, he was supposed to come to the state prison in Massachusetts. So, yeah, yeah. So the foreclosure happened in my name, which was the end of my credit.
Temporary. Temporary.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything's temporary. That's true. Having a foreclosure in your name is not something that banks enjoy seeing if you go to buy another property. That's probably not a big surprise.
So I'm going to jump forward a little bit here. And wow, what a story. I know that you have some other holdings now. Can you tell us? I mean, we'll put that foreclosure behind you because something happened great in your life that you were able to find this next opportunity. Could you tell us about that? What happened and how you ended up with these properties?
uh, these answers just sound so made up. It was just in February of 2011. I just woke up one morning and I said, I'm going to get back into it. That was it. And I said, I want to accelerate it. So I won't look at anything that's less than 6 units, which was kind of just arbitrary. It was just, I figured I would grow twice as fast as collecting 3 units. That was the whole thought. So this is February of 2011. I remember I woke up and I was like, all right, this is my thing. I'm going to figure out a way to get back into this. I've still got a foreclosure because it actually, posted on my credit in early '06. This is 5 years later. So that, I mean, not only is it part of public record, but everything stays on your credit for at least 7 years. So I was like, I'm not going to let that stop me. I'm going to get going. I start, writing this goal on pieces of paper, sticking it up all over the house. And so I was going to buy one within 6 months. And, I was a little off the mark. I did close on one in August, but it wasn't that August. It was the next August.
But you
So
got started.
that's how I got started.
So tell us
There,
about the deal. What was it? How did you do it?
how did I do it? The financing was one of the trickier things.
Well, let's
Um,
back up. How did you find it?
how did I find that deal? I didn't know. So as it turns out, anything that's 5 units or more is commercial real estate, which I knew, but I really didn't know what that meant. What that meant was that all the lending is completely different, and the method of appraisal is usually different. And there were just a lot of other things to learn. So I started reading a bunch of books on that while I was out looking at properties. I didn't know, this was something I didn't know when I bought my first property, was really how to evaluate a house. So I still didn't know how to do that, but I figured if I just broke into enough people's basements that had their houses on the market, I'd figure it out. But no, I didn't have to break in anywhere. People usually don't lock the doors to their basements. And if not, there's, a lot of times there's an open window. So you can learn a lot about a house by walking around the basement. True or false?
True, true, true.
Right? I mean, that's where, at least for me personally, if there's 6 apartments in a basement, I'm going to spend more time in that basement than I am in any other single area. Because, so anyway, I mean, even just walking around the outside of the house, you can figure out, is there a house meter? Which is a big thing to know when buying a property. So, but I didn't know I was looking for that. I just started driving around to houses and looking at them and trying to figure out what I was trying to figure out, which is kind of the elaboration on my answer before of just start. I didn't know what I was starting doing. I just knew I should probably leave the house. So I did that.
So you
So
found it.
so I found I heard a guy named Dolph the Roos. I think I'm messing up.
Yes.
That's his
Yeah.
name. Yeah, I think he's Australian. Um, he said that every time you make a purchase, you should make 100 offers. All right, I guess I'll make 100 offers. Well, within a 30-minute drive of the city of Worcester, which was my radius I was aiming for, that's kind of my backyard, so to speak. There just weren't 100 offers to make with listed properties, so I made 74 offers. Because that's all there was. And I was at the time confined to what was on the MLS. So here's what I did. I tried to make an offer on this one property, and the realtor never got back to me. Called, said, "Hey, should I email this? Should I fax it? I'd like to make an offer on this property." Oh, and by the way, I'm making offers on the properties. I'm not touring these apartments. I'm not wasting the realtor's time. I'm not wasting the owner's time. I'm not wasting the tenant's time. Um, I can tell by the rents what the apartment looks like. Okay, if the market rent for an apartment is $1,300 and they're charging $775, there's a reason for that. I know what that apartment looks like, don't you?
Not 1,300.
It's not 1,300, right? And if market's 1,300 and they're charging 14 and a quarter, that's probably a nice apartment. And it's uh, I made a lot of offers just under the assumption that um, if they were getting market rents, then it was probably an average or slightly above average apartment, and if they were getting below average rents, then it was probably below average apartments, and I would make my offers just kind of based on that. Because for me, there's no point in wasting my time or any of these other people's time. I'm doing this 74 times, right? My get times 6 apartments, like that's a lot of wasted energy if we're not if the seller isn't motivated, if they're sky high on their numbers, if they're not interested in the type of deal that I'm proposing, because I don't have any money. So I'm looking for a seller second. If they're not interested in a seller second, do I need to walk into every apartment? I don't, right? That deal's not happening. So I don't. Anyway, so I'm trying to make this offer. Realtor never gets back to me despite my persistence, which is weird. Listing expires. So I go on white pages after going on the registry of deeds, and I find one of the owner's phone numbers. I call him up. Say, "Hey, I saw your listing expire. Were you guys just not interested in selling?" He goes, "I'd love to sell it." So I bought it.
So how did you structure it? Where'd the money come from? How'd you structure the deal?
That is also a long answer, but it's probably interesting. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
Someone's going to learn from that.
Um, I recently looked, not it was recent enough that I remember it. Looked at my original proposal to the bank to do this. So before I could even do this, I tried to find a bank that was going to entertain my idea, my no money down idea, with my foreclosure on my record. And my credit score, even regardless of the foreclosure, wasn't especially high. Like I was in the sixes somewhere, um, and which is good enough, but it's not impressive. I wasn't going to be able to say, well, I've got this one thing, but I've got a 740 otherwise, which I felt like that was going to be an easier case to make. That's not the case I had. So I contacted 33 different banks and credit unions, and 32 of them told me that they would never consider doing business with me under any circumstances. And one said, "Let's see what you can do." And I said, "Okay." So that was my bank. And as it turns out, I didn't know this at the time. I learned this years later that it's literally the smallest bank in the Commonwealth.
Wow. Who is the
Yeah.
bank?
What's that?
We'll give him a shout out. Who was it?
Oh, Millbury National Bank. The fellow's name was John Latino, who, as far as I know, is still there. I would not be in business if this guy did not listen to me and give me a chance. Um, I think I made a compelling case to him, but it doesn't matter how compelling your case is if nobody's listening, and this guy listens, and I will forever be grateful to him for that. That's
Well,
for
we
sure.
just gave him a shout out. Maybe we can get him some business off that.
I don't know if he wants this type of business anymore. I'll
Fair
leave
enough.
that up
Fair
to
enough.
him. So I had a bank that was at least willing to listen. So I've got this offer. They asking price on the property was three like 390. And I said, well, look, you don't have to pay the real estate commission. It's just us. So can we do 360? And they said, sure. It's the same to us either way. So did the deal at 360, where the bank was going to be carrying 80% of that, and the sellers were going to carry back 20% in second position.
Wow.
Because
That's
I
huge. To be able to pull that off, that's huge.
Well, and I'm leaving out the parts where, oh, but maybe I shouldn't. Where when I would talk to when I would talk to sellers or real estate agents or banks, I heard there was really, it was almost like they rehearsed it. Rich, if what you're describing was possible, everybody would be doing it. I heard that over and over and over again, like a refrain in a Justin Bieber song, which is very repetitive. Um, So anyway, I did it. And then after that, I did it again. But so what did I do? This deal turned out to be interesting because the appraisal came back low. The appraisal came back at 330, which meant that I had to come out of pocket. They told me $30,000. I had $2,600, but I didn't really have that anymore because the bank made me pay for the appraisal out of pocket and something else I had to pay out of pocket. So my cash was gone. I don't mean like I had $2,600 like in an investment account for something and like my grocery money was somewhere else. I mean, I had $2,600. So most of that was gone because the bank made me pay for the stuff. I certainly didn't have another $30,000. So when I had met with the sellers, who are seasoned business guys, so I think that's why they were open to hearing my approach. They were, they had done deals. Sometimes you can just get creative in deals, and this was one of those, right? So I had originally made my offer because my balls are gigantic. With the 20% seller second at 0%.
Wow.
Um, and they said, "You've got to be out of your mind. 0% is an insult. We would never consider 0%. Do you think we're just going to let you do this and you're not even going to pay any interest on it?" All right. What did you guys have in mind? 2%. We won't settle for less than 2%.
You waited, and then
Said 2% the best you can do.
you did not.
Have to. I said, they said, yeah. And I said, all right, I'll make it work. So we did the deal at 2%. That was before the appraisal came back at 330. So now I've got a problem. The deal's dead. I don't have 30 grand. So here's what I did.
How'd you solve it?
I went back to the sellers. Went back to the brothers, and I said, I'm going to get you your 30 grand. I said, we're not going to change the amount of money that you're getting. We're just going to change how it looks on paper. We're going to change the interest rate here from 2% to 8 1/8. And this was a 48-month term, by the way. And by doing that, it increased the amount of interest over those 48 months by $30,000. And they said, as long as we get paid, have at it.
That's brilliant. So you changed the terms to come up with the extra 30.
Made it a win-win-win. The bank wanted the bank said that the max sale price could be 330. The brothers weren't going to just say, well, tough, we're giving up the 30 grand. They weren't, they wanted to sell, but they weren't willing to do that.
Sure.
And I couldn't do that. So found something that worked for everybody.
Where did you get that idea?
I just don't give up. I don't know where the idea came from, really, other than just there's always an answer. There's usually more than one. There's usually a bunch of them, right? But there's always a solution as long as your mind's open to it, right?
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing.
So I told you it was a long answer, but that's how I did that deal. Oh, wait, hold on. Here's the best part.
I'm here.
I
Go.
left I left out the team meeting that took place at the bank the day of the closing. So we get the it's not a HUD-1 that they were using because it was a commercial deal, it was some other form.
Sure.
Which is weird because every other commercial deal I've done since then, they actually just did it on a HUD-1. But anyway, they did it on some form. This doesn't matter. That was an unnecessary tangent. And I'm looking at the numbers, and they tell me that I need to write a check for $7,475.18 for closing costs. And I said, well, I said a lot of expletives in my head because this was not supposed to be happening, but I didn't say that out loud. Once I figured out what was happening, I told them, I said, no, this is wrong. This number's supposed to be on the other column. This number's supposed to be here. And the closing attorney referred me to the bank. The closing was actually taking place in the bank conference room. So that was fortuitous because a lot of closings happen at the attorney's office. We were in the bank. So I was able to leave the conference room, go in there, talking to the bank vice president and two other people that I had never met before at the bank. And I'm showing them how the numbers are wrong on the sheet. And I said, no. So I'm not supposed to be writing a check for $7,400. You're supposed to be writing me a check for like $5,000. And they were like, you don't get a check at the closing. You're the buyer. And I was like, here's the contract. Here's what everything says. This is where these numbers are supposed to go. This isn't new. This has been like this the whole time. And like it was in a movie, Brian, they lift up their heads from off the paper. They look at each other and they go, oh my God, you're right. And I walked away from the closing with a check for several $1,000s.
What a story.
Which enabled me to pay back the credit card that I had run the house inspection on, because I wasn't going to buy the house without doing a house inspection. So I paid like $1,800 for that, but I put that on a credit card. But I did it the day after my statement posted because we were getting really close to the closing. So when they ran when the bank ran my credit one last time on the closing date, they would only see how much was on the credit card at the last statement, and that was zero.
Timing. Wow.
Yeah. So there were a lot of things that I did to make that happen, and that's the way it happened.
So this property led to other properties with these same brothers, is that right?
No, this was their only property.
So that was one six family. Where did the other three come from?
The other three came from a single deal.
A single deal?
Yeah, one of my 74 offers that I had made, something really shady was going on with it. I had made an offer for like $96,000 on this property, and it ended up selling for like $88,000 the next week. And that alone isn't shady, because like if the 88 grand was cash and mine was financing, then then fine. That shouldn't be shocking. But I happen to have had the seller's contact information. And I asked him, I said, hey, by the way, did the realtor ever show you my $96,000 offer? And he said, no, I didn't know you made an offer. So the realtor was doing something shady with the people who ultimately ended up buying it. And I wanted to know what that was. I wanted to know how they made that happen. This led to some crazy lawsuits, and I got named in some RICO brief that got like a racketeering thing that this guy dreamed up. As it turns, so be careful who you go into business with. There were three guys involved in this purchase, and I met one of them, and I'm really glad that I only knew about the one of them because it was his company that the building was bought in, and this guy was not shady. This guy had lots of opportunities to lie to me or to stretch the truth, and years later, everything this guy told me was true. He was a straight shooter, but he got involved with this other clown who was had just trouble written all over him. Ended up costing him hundreds of thousands of dollars. But anyway, so I ended up finding. I wanted to know how I lost that deal. Wouldn't you? So
Yeah.
I looked it up on the registry of deeds, figured out, found the company that bought it, went to the Secretary of State's website, figured out who the officers were. There were only one, tracked down his phone number, and he invited me over his house. Going over his house, and because I wanted to learn how to do deals that you just don't find laying around the MLS. You know what I mean? Because that's all I knew. He had some insider knowledge, and I wanted to know what that was. So I went over his house, and he was really helpful. Gave me some good advice, and like a year later, he wanted to sell some buildings because he was having problems with this other guy, and he needed to dissolve that relationship. And selling these buildings in a hurry was part of that solution for him. So he knew I didn't have any money. He knew how I bought the other one, and but because he was in a hurry, and he knew I would pay what he wanted for it, because when you don't have any money, you don't really get to negotiate the sale price that much, right? I was his solution, and he was mine. He quadrupled my portfolio. That is also a very long story, but that one's probably not as interesting. It's just a mess. There's one piece of advice that I have that came out of that, and that was when there was a tenant mutiny, and they all banded together and they weren't paying the rent, and they were taking clumps of hair out of their hairbrushes, sticking it down the drain, clogging their own drains, calling the board of health. Like it was a mess. I did not want to close under those circumstances. Would you? Probably not.
Maybe.
Maybe
I'm
you're
going to
thinking
say
about
it depends. It
it.
depends.
Okay. Okay. Well, do you mind if I hear your perspective on that?
Well, the property can always be fixed. The people can always be replaced.
Oh, yes. Yes. And I wanted the property fixed and the people replaced before I owned it.
See, okay.
And I'll tell you why. Because even though I had this one other building and I was taking care of it, I still don't have any cash. So I was not in a financial position to be able to absorb problems. I needed something stable that was stable to start off with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
If you've got a couple $100,000 in the bank because you've been doing this for a while, you can absorb a lot of problems, and you can pick up a lot of problem deals that I was not in a position to be able to do at that time. So I needed something that was not a complete nightmare from day one.
So you were able to work those terms into the agreement?
Sort of. I had a really good relationship with Kevin, the seller, up to this point, and it had been tumultuous because of his partner and all the legal problems and lawsuits. He sued my bank. He sued Millbury National Bank.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just nuts. There's another thing with that. I feel like I'm talking a lot.
That's the idea, Rich.
So
That's how it works.
one thing I did well, because I wanted to maintain my relationship with this guy, and I knew we were going to be on opposite ends of this. He wanted out in a hurry. Like every time this other clown issued a new legal problem, like it just made him more motivated to get out. And he was telling me, he's like, look, it's no problem. He's like, we'll start the eviction process. You can finish it after you take over. You know, these board of health issues are they're made up. They're doing this. It's the people that are doing it. It's not problems with the building. And all that turned out to be true. But again, just wasn't willing to do it. I was willing to walk away from. I was my greed was not so high that I was willing to take this. I wasn't willing to go. I wasn't willing to fail that hard again. You know, I already had a property foreclosed on. You know, that was when I was in my 20s. Fine. You know, now I'm in my 30s, and I'm not willing to go bankrupt at this point. Like there's enough deals out there where I can find something that is stable. I don't have to settle for something that has the potential to drag me down with these other guys that are having nothing but problems with these properties, right? So that was my perspective at the time. So what I did was I hired an attorney to be the bad guy for me. And I hired the attorney and I said, here's what I need to have happen. You argue with this guy and you tell, and I told Kevin, I said, look, I said, you know, I need an attorney, obviously, for the closing anyway. I'm going to have the attorney sort this out. There's been so much going on that like this is so far out of my league. And he wasn't like, so he didn't take it personally. Like that sounds pretty reasonable. So the attorney was the bad guy. And he got me everything that I needed to get. It was either, you know, get the people out of this particular apartment or you know, a $4,000 credit per apartment or something like that. It was an either or kind of scenario where either he solved the problem or he gave me the cash at closing to solve the problem. But either way, the problem was going to get solved without me having to absorb the financial cash outlay to do it. And we got all that stuff sorted out. And then the bad guy sued my bank, and the bank said, "We're out. You owe us $6,000 or whatever it was. It was thousands of dollars for the out-of-pocket costs we have into this so far. We're not doing your deal." They sent me a bill.
How'd you close?
I don't remember how I paid the bank, but they had been really good to me. This wasn't their fault. And whatever was going to happen with my future, I wanted to make it right with them first. Um, so I found a way to. I may have had $6,000 at this point, like not comfortably that I could give up, but like I could have done it. So whatever it was, whatever the amount was, I paid the bank. This was early October, um, and it was over. So I stayed up late one night after I did this, and I started going on Vistaprint and like ordering postcards, and I was like, I'm out of cash now. It took me years to fix up this other building that was not in great shape. I invested all the money into the property. I wasn't taking anything out of it for myself. I had a couple $1,000s saved up just from being somewhat financially responsible. And now all of that's gone because I gave it to the bank. So I saved my relationship with the bank. They're willing to do another deal with me sometime in the future. More importantly, I feel like I did the right thing. But I'm not in a great spot right now. I have no cash and I have no deals. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna get in the house full business. I'm gonna wholesale properties. I'm gonna build up my cash. This has happened. This is too slow. I have to accelerate this. So I went on Vistaprint. I put some money on a credit card and I bought a list and I mailed out the cards and I started trying to figure out how to do that. And 3 weeks later, I got a phone call that said, "Hey, all this stuff is sorted out. We can close in 3 days. Are you still in?"
Wow.
And I said, "Yeah." So we closed. Like it happened. It all came together so fast. We closed 3 days later, and I got another check at the closing for tens of thousands of dollars. Um, all of the tenants had been replaced. There were no like all of the problems were resolved, and it all came together. And I might be superstitious. I could be wrong. I could be right. I don't. It's kind of unknowable. But I wonder if that came together for me because I just didn't give up. Like I tried to treat everybody right along the way, and I didn't. I just didn't give up. I didn't say, all right, well, I guess this just isn't for me, and closed that door, you know, in the cosmos. I don't know, but that's what happened.
Amazing. And then that turned into a few other properties. And then here you are today. I think you've answered my next question. What was the biggest hurdle? And that was a nail biter at the end of that story. And then closing in 3 days and giving you a check for tens of thousands of dollars. That just doesn't happen. But it happened.
It did happen. And another thing that I did, this was my idea that happened at the end with that. And I don't know if this is, I stiffed the attorney. And I'm really good at stiffing people if they don't finish the job. I didn't really stiff them. Part of the deal was I needed a written guarantee from this other guy. His name's Nick Fiorillo, okay? And the guy from the first story is Alan Seymour. Just if you ever see those names, just tell him to have a nice day and walk in the other direction, okay? I needed an agreement signed by this guy, Nick Fiorillo, that that he was never going to contact me or any business that I'm a member of, or anything. And it was, that I was just never going to hear from this guy or anybody that he knows. That was that, and the attorney lost the paper. He said, "Oh, the other closing attorney was supposed to have it." And I was like, "Yeah, but you're my attorney. So if she screwed up getting it signed, you need to get it signed." And I said, "I'm happy to pay your bill as soon as I have that thing signed." And it took him a year, but he got the thing signed. I paid him the same day. I was like, "Here you go."
Wow.
Yeah, so he made it right, and I made it right. But yeah, I wasn't going to pay his bill without that. And fortunately, I've never heard from this guy. This guy made up a racketeering thing and filed it in federal court. He named me. He named Kevin's bookkeeper. Like he just started naming anybody he could name. It was nuts.
Wow.
This is what he does. His whole mode of operation is to just be such a pain in someone's ass that they're willing to pay him any amount of money to make him go away.
And then he found you.
He found me because I was taking over the building, because I was buying the buildings.
And you weren't going to give up.
I was willing to give up. I was willing to give up on those buildings, but I wasn't willing to give up on entrepreneurship, on real estate, on business, on myself, on my life. I was going to figure out how to get some kind of passive income one way or the other. And if this wasn't the way, then that's fine. There's another way. I'll find that. But you can find a way or make a way.
Amazing, Rich. I didn't know your whole story, and this was good. I should have had some popcorn or something. I really enjoyed this. So we're going to wrap it up here. We're just over the hour mark here. I thank you so much. No, this was great. I really appreciate it. So you gave us so much information. I just kind of want to sum up some of the key points here. First, absolutely, get started.
With whatever it is. I mean, whether it's real estate or something else, whatever it is, nothing happens till you start.
But why not real estate?
If you're not going to take care of the people in the buildings, and you're not going to take care of the buildings, then not real estate.
Fair enough. So get started. Never give up. Find a way. You told us about that sleepless night where you thought of a way to do it. I mean, that moving the numbers on the interest was brilliant. It was a number on a spreadsheet, which at the beginning we mentioned you're the king of spreadsheets. All wonderful. So where Where is your future path and why not real estate headed? Where do you see yourself headed? What's your next big, hairy, audacious goal?
That is pretty nebulous at the moment, and not because I'm entirely directionless, but because the world is changing so fast. Um, things are changing exponentially, and I don't know where the opportunities are going to be in 5 years or 3 years or 2 years or 6 months from now. So I'm just trying to keep an open mind. I'm fond of real estate because it's the known for me. Rental property is what I know. Um, I don't I don't suck at it anymore, which is a bonus. Um, but so it may just be more rental properties, but it may be other things that come along. I don't know. There may be other business opportunities that might make sense to also get involved in.
I'm going to backtrack a couple of questions here. You had mentioned the landlording book by Leigh Robinson. Lee
Uh,
Robinson. Leigh Robinson. That was a book that had an influence on you. Was there a second book that is on your bookshelf that influenced you in a great way?
I've read dozens of books on real estate. Um, and I'll answer the question. Like one that comes to mind is the E Myth. I think that's a really important one for somebody to distinguish um, the difference between being self-employed and being a business owner and even getting to, well, now I'm talking about the cash flow quadrant from Robert Kiyosaki, which is a really important concept um, to understand, that to go from being a business owner to being an investor. Those are different things, and they're on the right side of the quadrant from employed or self-employed. Um, but the E Myth, I really feel like, takes that concept and just drills it into your skull so many times that you can't forget it. You can't not have it become part of your thought pattern. But while I've read some really good quality books, I really feel like there's something to be said for the quantity. Um, if I were to pick up a random property management book today, pretty good at what I do, I guarantee there's going to be something in there that is going to be helpful. It's going to make things easier, make things better. Um, and just continuing to put those things in your head is really important. Like I feel like you're never really done if you're serious.
And I just want to make a note that the E Myth was written by Michael Gerber.
Michael Gerber, yeah.
So we'll put that out there as well. Cash Flow Quadrant, very, very important book. Robert Kiyosaki. The other book that everybody names is Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Dad, poor dad. Yeah, that's
That,
that's the one everybody names. Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
that changes the whole paradigm of how you think about assets and liabilities.
Sure.
Rich, this has been fascinating, entertaining. I knew it would be entertaining. Any last words you'd like to share with our Why Not Real Estate peeps?
What are my choices?
How can they get in touch with you? How can they bring deals to your pipeline?
Oh, I'm an introvert. Don't get in touch with me.
I got to tell people, Rich has the best answering on his cell phone. I'm not going to give it out or anything like that.
Oh, okay. Well, it's not mine. Somebody told me it was actually created by National Lampoon. I don't know if
I
you
would
heard.
believe it. It is hilarious. It's hilarious. If you ever do hook up with Rich and get to call his mobile phone and not reach him, be entertained. It is the best answer I've ever heard on an answering service.
Yeah, if somebody wants
Very
to get in
funny.
contact with me, they should probably just get in contact with Brian, who is the consummate people person, and he is the guy I plagiarized my entire property management business from when I got started. That's the truth. And so Brian's the guy to talk to.
Happy to share. Happy to share. Happy to hear your story. I want to thank you so much for being our premier guest on the Why Not Real Estate podcast. This is Rich Merlino and Brian Lucier at the podcast signing out. Thank you.